Hi everyone, Marco and Code here for a brand new episode of our special edition, Lore of the Universal Century. Today we're going back again to the Zeta era, in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video we are going to explore the history of Scirocco's personal handgun, its mechanical lore, variants, and extract every bit of mechanical knowledge we have on them so far. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Palace Athene? Codenamed PMX-001, the Palace Athene was a prototype super heavy attack and mid-range support mobile suit, deployed by Scirocco's Loyalist Titans forces of the Jubitrice in the later stages of the Gryps War. A one-of-a-kind handmade machine designed by Paptimus Scirocco as part of his PMX series of mobile weapons and manufactured inside the Jubitrice itself, the Palace Athene was a very unique yet very innovative mobile suit, being specially designed to put a heavy emphasis on mid-range support, anti-cheat capabilities, and overwhelming firepower, collaborating with the other two PMX machines known as the Borinox-Saman and Vio by serving as the weapon platform of the trio. Indeed, the Palace Athene was one of the few second-generation mobile suits, alongside the Gundam Mark V, that could be borderline considered as fourth-generation models, being built around a super large frame armed to its teeth, mounting a wide variety of assets to crush the enemy with overwhelming firepower. First of all, the Palace Athene introduced a comprehensive inbuilt beam-based arsenal, most notably a pair of shoulder-mounted diffusion beam cannons, capable of firing multiple low-output beam rays and very handy to blind the enemy, provide suppressive fire, track targets, or disengage in close-range combat. Coupled with those cannons were a pair of wrist-mounted mega beam cannons, weapons with a firing output largely exceeding conventional beam rifles, thus easily enabling the Palace Athene to shoot down enemies with a single hit. Now, both those weapons were not the Palace Athene primary offensive armament, with that place being reserved to a composite weapon mounted on its right arm, a long double-barreled asset integrating both beam and physical armaments. The so-called twin beam gun indeed mounted a pair of long-range rapid-firing beam guns, whose fire rate could be lowered to instead raise the output, providing the Palace Athene with substantial increased firepower. This feature was notably shown during the Palace Athene raid against the gargantuan super battleship the Gosegir, with around 6 shots of that double-barrel weapon being able to neutralize all the vital core structures of the ship before blasting its bridge, sinking it. Ice on the cake, that twin beam gun also mounted an unbuilt additional grenade launcher, said to be of the same type that the Mesalas, thus providing a supplementary versatile feature in mid-range to close-range engagements. Even better, the Palace Athene was also designed with consideration to equipment swapping and mission adequacy, the suit also introducing optional fixed equipments depending on the mission needs. On its back, the Palace Athene mounted a pair of movable shields, providing additional protection to its rear, but mainly designed to fix a total of 8 ultra-large anti-ship missiles, projectiles capable of destroying any kind of mobile suits in a single hit, and severely crippling enemy warships. Those missiles were fully capable of operating under Minovsky interference, but were also equipped with a very costly optic seeker guidance, capable of recognizing enemy targets and tracking them, dramatically increasing their hit ratio. For missions believed to involve more mobile suit to mobile suit combat, the Palace Athene could instead equip, or just equip additionally, a special round shield, providing protection while also mounting a total of 8 monotube missile launchers, each capable of firing 5 consecutive missiles in total, and thus provide exceptional control on the battlefield by delivering overwhelming missile volleys. Final little threat for the Palace Athene, the model also introduced a pair of claw feet as a lower body gimmick, giving the Palace Athene the capacity to use its legs as talon weapons, very useful to capture enemy mobile suits after rushing to them as a sort of bird of prey. This resulted in the Palace Athene being a very unique yet extremely high-performance mobile weapon, an integral part of Scirocco's battle doctrine involving his attack trio of the PMX series, and one of the most dangerous models to ever roam the mid-UC 80s. Now, as always, and despite its high-quality design, the Palace Athene was not a wonder weapon, with the suit also coming with its own share of flaws. First of all, the Palace Athene's large size and weight, nearly 30 meters tall for 91.5 tons when fully equipped, due to all armaments and gimmicks, resulted in a great handicap in terms of mobility, so much that added verniers and powerful thrusters could not completely fix the issue. This made the Palace Athene poorly maneuverable and underwhelming during high-speed combat, but also quite vulnerable in anti-mobile suit close-range combat, with many smaller and lighter second and third generation models being able to press the Palace Athene due to its low agility. Secondly, the Palace Athene was a rather conservative design when it came to its sensors and cameras, at least compared with past specialized mid-range support models like the gun cannon, with its sensors being said to be average and offering even less range than other non-specialized models such as the Zeta Gundam or even the Gaplant. These made the Palace Athene a bit too over-reliant on its peer suit, the Bolino Axaman, to detect enemies and collect battlefield data for it to direct its firepower, thus making it a bit lackluster when fielded on its own. To be fair, the Palace Athene had a mono eye with an excellent rotation axis that could track targets from behind, but even there, the mono eye was said to be fairly standard. Funnily enough, the Palace Athene generators, rated at 1790 kilowatts, was of a rather weak output considering its task to power so many beam weapons, although some sources have brought the idea forward that the Palace Athene also likely mounted an additional secondary sub-generator whose specs were never reported to the Federation forces, which means that the Palace Athene reached outputs closer to 3000 kilowatts, like many future 4th generation mobile suits. Despite this, the Palace Athene still remained a groundbreaking design, one that foreshadowed the advent of the 4th generation of mobile suits by a couple of months, and which served the Titans, Scirocco yes, faithfully for its entire existence during the Gryps War, until its own destruction at the battle for the colony laser. But that's enough setting for today, let's get to our lore. The year is Universal Century 87. At that time, the Federation civil war known as the Gryps Conflict was entering its early stages, with the Anti-Zion Remnants Task Force organization, the Titans, encountering a newfound opposition from both Space Noids and defected federal elements, banded together in a rebel organization known as the Anti-Earth Union Group, created to oppose the Titans' harsher and harsher policies and their tightening grasp over not just the Federation itself, but the totality of the Earth sphere. Far away from there, in the depths of space separating Earth and Jupiter, was a ship slowly returning to its mother planet, the gargantuan carrier Jupitris of the Jupitris class, very own flagship of the famed Jupiter Energy Fleet. On the command of such ship was a brilliant captain of the Federation forces, a man known as Paptimus Scirocco, nicknamed the Man of Jupiter, an exceptional and incredibly charismatic commander. A magnetic figure capable of commanding incredible loyalty amongst his subordinates and charmed pretty much any woman that crossed his path, Scirocco was also an exceptional pilot and a very powerful new type, but more simply, also doubled as a brilliant mobile suit designer, the Jupiter's captain taking advantage of the massive power plants facilities of his ship to design, then manufacture his own mobile creations, the PMX series. A group of incredibly costly, unique, unconventional, yet super high performance mobile weapons, the PMX were Scirocco's personal pet project and reflection on mobile technology as a whole, being all handcrafted and uniquely customized since UC-84 and based on Scirocco's personal thoughts and battle doctrines. Before the proper advent of the entire PMX series, Scirocco had already manufactured a custom transformable mobile armor for himself, the PMX-001 Mesala, a machine specially designed to operate near Jupiter and capable of filling the role of a high-thrust interceptor, an anti-ship platform, and also a dangerous anti-mobile suit asset. After the completion of the Mesala, Scirocco then started laying the basis for the continuation of his PMX series, his magnum opus, with 3 prototype mobile suits being designed and assembled in short succession during the Jupiter's return to the Earth sphere. These 3 crude mobile suits, designed as data gatherers and early prototypes, were created directly as a realization of Scirocco's personal battle doctrine, involving 3 high-performance mobile suits collaborating with each other as a tight squadron, a doctrine Scirocco directly envisioned based on the wide-based trio success during the 1-year war. Scirocco's line of thought was that the gun trio's incredible performance during the war was the result of them being specialized units working together and completing each other in a unique synergy. The gun tank providing long-range firepower and bombardment capabilities, the gun cannon mid-range fire support and sniping, and the Gundam as the jack-of-all-trades close-range specialist. Thus Scirocco started working on his own trio of completing mobile suits, twisting his interpretation of the gun trio doctrine to fit what he believed would make a trio more effective in space warfare. Thus, Scirocco's early idea for this trio was for it to adopt a specific combat doctrine, including a close-range agile specialist meant to close the gap and overpower enemies in close-range combat, a Newok specialist to detect the enemy and provide battle data to the other two, even under heavy Minovsky interference, and finally, a heavily armored mobile suit, designed to provide heavy firepower and include special gimmicks as last resort weapons. These three mobile suits were the Type 001, Type 002 and Type 003, respectively the melee combat test model, standard frame test model, and special equipment test machine. Three mobile suits created as early versions of the incoming PMX series and direct scarecrow forms of the Palace Athene, Bolino Axaman, and Leo. But let's focus on the Type 001, aka the melee combat test model. One of those three prototype machines that Scirocco had been working on since the Jupiter's departure from the Jupiter sphere, the Type 001 was a very light and agile close-range mobile suit, primarily designed to put an emphasis on high mobility, ditching as much armor as possible to outmaneuver then slash the enemy to death. Weaponry-wise, the Type 001 came equipped with its signature beam weapon, a sort of beam naginata similar to the one used by the Gelgog during the One-Year War, but with a different handle. For protection purposes, the Type 001 instead equipped a Gelgog-type solid shield, coming with 3 tubes inbuilt in the center, which are believed to be missile launchers, a concept that would later evolve in the Palace Athene's missile shield. Alongside these assets, the Type 001 was fairly standard, mounting 2 back-mounted propellant cylinders for longer cruising range, alongside fit spikes as supplementary offensive tools. Now, from which tech line did Scirocco develop the Type 001 is not exactly known, although the Type 001 shares a lot of similarities with the Gyan of the old Principality of Zeon, and also a good chunk of equipment with its cousin and rival the Gelgog, which may suggest Scirocco used them both as a reference, similarly to the Type 003, itself having some similarities with the Rickdom of the One-Year War days. The Type 001 being based on the Gelgog and Gyan would actually make a lot of sense, considering Scirocco was in the Jovian sphere since the early UC 80s, with Zeta defined while an alternative retelling, yes, even hinting that Scirocco wasn't even aware the Titans existed before his return in UC 87. Funnily enough, Scirocco is also known to have encountered and fought a Gyan type, the Gyan X piloted by Shah Aznavour, around UC 83 during a skirmish around Axis resource base in Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons, events that took place in another of Kondo's books, Record of Mobile Suit Wars 2. According to Gundam Walpurgis timeline, Scirocco started designing his mobile weapons around UC 84, 1 year after that event took place, which leaves open the possibility that Scirocco's encounter with the Gyan X left a strong enough impression that he included a similar design for his own trio, the Type 001. In any case, the Type 001 was eventually finished between UC 84 and UC 87, being brought back to the Earth sphere alongside its siblings the Type 002 and Type 003, and of course Scirocco's own personal mobile armor, the Messala, which was the only completed design of the lot. At that time, it is known that Scirocco was not completely satisfied with the 3 proto-PMX units, feeling that the 3 of them would need some data collection in live combat for him to finalize their designs properly. This opportunity came to be once the Jupiteris arrived in the Earth sphere, around the Titans HQ of the Gate of Zedan, once the asteroid base of Abawaku, the Jupiteris receiving a distress signal from the nearby Titans facility. To make this clear, this event, which seems to have taken place a bit after Scirocco's return to the Earth sphere and rampage against the Euk fleet with the Messala, coincided with Admiral Jamitov Hyman, the Titan's supreme leader, presiding over a naval review around the Gate of Zedan, as a show of force to display the Titan's might, slightly before episode 21 of Zeta Gundam. There, a group of Zeon remnants, mostly using Zaku's and Rigdoms with modernized high-mobility boosters, launched an attack against the Naval Review, being tipped off by a mysterious sponsor, either the Ayug, Axis or Anaheim, with their objective being to assassinate Jamitov to cripple Titan's leadership. These remnants had also been gifted a certain trump card by their sponsor, a modified and upgraded Bigro, a large 1-year war high-speed combat mobile armor. Although Titan's pilots in Gym 2s and Gym Quells were able to fend off the remnants, the Titans had still launched a distress signal to nearby patrols, which the Jupiters intercepted and moved forward to support the fleet. Scirocco, who now wanted to put himself in Jamitov's good graces, and decided to jump on the opportunity, deploying the 3 early PMX units, which at that point had been scheduled for a test flight and were piloted by Jupiter's test pilots, alongside launching himself in the Messala to deal with the enemy. There, Scirocco and the Messala engaged a high-speed duel with the enemy Bigro, before suppressing it by transforming in mobile suit mode and crushing it all together. Meanwhile, the other 3 PMX units then moved to intercept the Zeon Remnant's mobile suits, initially achieving good results, until they were not. The Type 001, piloted by test pilot Douglas, was notably able to dispatch some Rigdoms by butchering them in close-range combat, but then became confused by the remnants launching dummy balloons. Some of these balloons were actually booby-trapped with explosives, which Douglas sadly discovered as he tried cutting them down to find the real enemy, with one of them exploding right in the face of the Type 001, greatly damaging it and blowing its legs off, although Douglas survived by ejecting in an escape pod. Soon after, the Type 002 also suffered critical damage due to it being left without proper protection, with the Zeon Remnant's main ace then moving on to finish the trio. There, the Type 003 was deprived of both its arms by the cunning ace, although the Rigdom pilot didn't anticipate the hidden special equipment of the Type 003, which costed him dearly. As the ace moved in for the kill, the Type 003 deployed its special equipment, a pair of claw sub-legs, which seized the enemy Rigdom and crushed it to death. This engagement was a somewhat pyrrhic victory for the PMX suits, notably due to the inexperience of their test pilots, which Scirocco took into account, using the combat data of that engagement to drastically rework his early vision for this trio. The Type 002 was first reworked into the actual Bolino Axaman, receiving additional stealth abilities alongside supplementary close and mid-range combat assets, so as to avoid it being left underprotected should its siblings be too far away to cover it. The Type 003, the suit that performed the best during that engagement, was then chosen by Scirocco as his next personal suit, reworking the special equipment into the eventual subarms and having the close combat role transfer from the Type 001 to it, thus becoming the actual rising star known as Theo. The Type 001 was instead reworked to feature much sturdier and bulkier armor layers, in account of what had happened during the past combat with the dummy balloons, with the close combat role being, as we said, given to Theo, and the Type 001 being reworked to provide mid and overall fire support to the Saman and Theo, Scirocco likely considering that the PMX failures during the fight with the remnants were due to them lacking enough fire support to keep the enemy in check. Thus was the Type 001 reworked into the Palace Athene, named after the Greek goddess of war and wisdom, with the suit abandoning its close combat roots completely to instead rebrand itself as the fire support specialist of the entirely upgraded PMX trio. The now completed Palace Athene was then kept in storage aboard the Jupitris, with Scirocco planning to hand the suit to a subordinate he would view as trustworthy enough to pilot it, using it from time to time in the meanwhile. This subordinate came in the form of Ayug defector Rico Alonde, who, disgruntled by the Ayug use of child soldiers, overall lack of reconnaissance, and Quattro Bagina's constant spurnings and negligence, became smitten by Scirocco during a spy mission aboard the Jupitris, with Rekoa eloping to join the Titans, and later Scirocco loyalist forces to be precise. Being given information that Bascom was trying to assemble his own Cyber New Tab Corps, Scirocco dismissed the idea as being unrealistic at this point of the war, but upon hearing Rekoa was considered a possible candidate, he immediately moved to seduce her, snatching another potential pilot from base control, something he had already done with new Tab candidate Sarah Zabiarov. This being done, Rekoa would then be temporarily handed over the Messala during a couple of missions, after which Scirocco deemed her capable, and more importantly head over heels enough for him to assign her to the Palace Athene, which became her de facto suit for the rest of the Gryps War. With Rekoa in the piloting seat, the Palace Athene took a rightful place amongst the Bolinox-Saman and Dio as Scirocco PMX trio, being used for the rest of the Gryps War for a lot of nefarious purposes, including assisting Scirocco against the Kubele, sinking the Dogose gear, and finally damaging the Gundam Mark II during the battle for the Colony Laser. In this battle, the Mark II would prevail over the much larger Palace Athene, which would, once disabled, be backstabbed by her ally Yazan Gabel and his Hambrabi, who shot at the immobile Palace Athene to kill a machine, the Mark II pilot, that had left the cockpit to try to help Rekoa. This last attack caused the disabled Palace Athene to explode, destroying it and sending shrapnel made of its armor flying in space, critically injuring Emma and causing her death. Soon after, Dio and Scirocco would also fall to the Zeta Gundam in that same battle, thus leading to the total destruction of the PMX trio, the Bolinoak and Sara having been lost in an earlier mission. Thus died out the original PMX series, disappearing alongside their twisted creator as the Gryps War finally came to an end. Scirocco's untimely demise and the PMX disappearance was however not the end of the story for that cursed development line, nor for Scirocco's twisted legacy, with a group of former soldiers, sailors and engineers loyal to Scirocco, all part of the Jupiter's crew, eventually surviving not just the battle for the Colony Laser, but the Gryps War altogether, while a small number of them would later defect to Neo Zeon and produce their own PMX-derived suits for the Neo Zeon remnants such as Dio II and the Breda. A good chunk of them instead colluded into the shadowy cabal known as the Clan, an organization hell-bent on continuing Scirocco's legacy at all costs. The Clan, lost with this fascination for their former patron and led by the ex-captain of the Jupiteris, Haifan, would start preparing themselves to revive Scirocco and have their vindication, notably finishing Scirocco's super weapon, the Orpheus Flare, an early angel halo capable of turning people in the same state as Camille, and trying to resurrect Scirocco through cloning, which would lead to the creation of Mashiro Oaks, the protagonist of Gundam Walpurgis. The Clan also started massing some mobile suits partially designed by Scirocco himself, such as the Ambrabi and Gapflay, as well as retrieving and restoring some PMX suits, the Messala and Bolinoak-Saman to be precise. The crown jewel of the Clan was however them tampering with the design of Scirocco's own masterpiece, his planned final step for the PMX series, the PMX-004 Tytania. Now we are going to cover the Tytania in due form in a future video about Dio some other day, but keep in mind that Scirocco's endgame was this massive new type-use mobile suit, developed from Dio but also aesthetically inspired by the Palace Athene, and designed to be piloted by Scirocco's Queen of the Earth, aka the regent he believed would rule the Earth sphere after the Gryps War.
Yeah, the puppet leader he wished to install.
Due to Scirocco's early death, the Tytania was never completed in time, with the Clan taking over its development, eventually finishing it around UC89 as the PMX-004-2, the Tytania II. A new type-use transformable machine, the Tytania II was thus completed as the Clan's trump card against their opponents, being finalized as a 4th generation mobile suit rather than the weird 2nd generation stage the original Tytania was supposed to be. First of all, the Tytania II was a machine boosting high firepower, even at the apex of 4th generation models, mounting a long rifle as a signature beam weapon, a pair of beam cannons on its shoulders, and a triple beam gun mounted on its shield. Shield directly based on the Palace Athene own weapon, and which mounted a high field to deflect enemy beam attacks. When it came to its close range abilities, the Tytania II also outshined Dio and Type 001 in the matter, equipping a total of 4 sub-arms capable of raising beam sabers, thus making it able to draw 6 beam sabers at the same time to cut the enemy to shreds. Ice on Decay, the Tytania II's long rifle could also double as a sort of high-output beam spear trident hybrid weapon, offering greater reach and destructive power than even average hyper beam sabers. If this wasn't enough, the Tytania II also came equipped with a transferable mechanism, enabling it to shift into an alternative mobile armor mode, a feature that even the original Tytania wasn't planned to adopt. Now, much like the original Titania, the Titania II was a new type use mobile suit, with its special Psychomove system enabling its new type pilot to control a total of 8 wireless funnels to overwhelm the enemy with all range attacks. As final control features, the Titania could be piloted unmanned and directed by an operator inside the Jupitris, but could also entangle the new type pilot in the cockpit with special wires and inject them with a mind-rewriting enhancement drug, overwriting their personality and making them follow the instruction of the Jupitris-placed officer that would pose as Scirocco due to the drugs. This feature would notably be used at the end of the manga Gundam World Purges, where the Titania II would be deployed by the clan to counter Scirocco's other leftover, the Oberon Gundam and its pilot Mashiro Oaks. There, the Titania II would put a titanic fight, no pun intended, against his sibling, or should I say husband unit thanks to Shakespeare, with both mobile suits matching its others in raw performance. To try to finish off the Oberon, Captain Ifan would use the drug feature to coerce the Titania II pilot, Florinia, only for Oaks to display a genuine sense of enlightened humanity, using the very own Gryps curse which had once killed Scirocco to connect with Florinia and make her regain her senses. Scirocco's soul would as a result remove Mashiro's innate piloting gifts, born out of being his clone and planned vessel, to let him live a normal life, leaving Oaks struggling to rescue Florinia as the Titania II was destroyed. Mashiro and Florinia would however reunite and get some much needed closure, concluding the Walpurgis manga. With the Titania II destroyed, the legacy of the Palace Athene was also abruptly finished, with the design of its siblings, Dio and the Bolnoxaman, getting renewed interest from Neo Zeon, but not the Palace Athenes, condemning Requa's mobile suit to obscurity. The Palace Athene carcass would however be recovered at some point during the age of the space warring states, around 70-80 years later, with rumors about a mysterious and secretive workshop in the Earthsphere retrieving all mobile suit carcasses to store them, analyze them, and replicate some of their parts. The Palace Athene would be one of such suits that would have such a fate, with Palace Athene parts being replicated by this mysterious organization and sent back across the mobile suit market, with some of them being acquired by one of many mobile suit workshops that had taken over most of remaining mobile suit production in the late UC 160s. This workshop would end up using such replica parts in 2 of the mixed builds they crafted for the infamous Breakers, a group of 5 highly skilled, which is debatable, mercenaries that roamed around in that time period. The first of the Breakers mixed builds that used Palace Athene replica parts was the infamous monstrosity known as the Viaggo, a machine made using a Palace Athene replica chest, a Dio replica lower body, a Gerbera Tetra backpack, and large Zedan zone arms, and an oversized Agai replica head. Overall, the Viaggo was a very unbalanced mobile suit, with little tactical usability or assigned role, serving as one of the Breaker's mid-range support models due to it being compatible with Dio own rifle, which it shouldn't be able to use per the lore, but that's Crossbone does for you. Aside the Viaggo, the Breakers also made use of the less stupid but still terrible Magatsugi Kai, another mixed build that introduced replicas of the Palace Athene legs and feet, a Zuda head, camphor armor, a Yakdoga replica chest, and a Domtropen backpack. Much like the Viaggo, the Magatsugi Kai was not really a balanced mobile suit either, being usually paired with a Hit-Hawk and a Geradoga shield, and used as one of the 2 close-range attackers of the band. In all cases, even dust mechanical files indicate that both the Viaggo and Magatsugi were assembled without remotely understanding the Palace Athene purpose and design doctrine, which is why the parts were reused in 2 separate designs, both underwhelming to be entirely honest. The Viaggo and the Magatsugi Kai, alongside the rest of the Breakers, would then appear in the early chapters of Crossbone Dust, being hired to board a transport by Cyclops, the new Federation task force, transport which carried a 2,000 people population that had been sold to the Federation. This directly put the Breakers at odds with Mighty Transport, the protagonist transport company, and their shining star Ash King and his anchor, with Mighty Transport being hired by a private contractor to free the woman from the Federation grasp. This resulted in the Breakers engaging the enemy anchor, cornering it for a moment, until the superior anchor was able to turn the tides of the combat, destroying or disabling most of them. The coup de grace would come from the Breakers' own patron, Cyclops, with the handling officer Arnold Gilvester bombarding them with its own mixed build, the Volcano, in an attempt to get rid of everyone in a single salvo. The Viaggo would notably be destroyed in such a way, in one of the best friendly fire moments in the entire Universal century, and with the Viaggo and Magatsugi ended the story of the Palace Athene line, in a rather shameful form, far away from its very refined and high quality form. To be honest, this fate also befell on the Messala, Bolino Axaman and Leo, whose replica parts were all reused in idiotic mixed builds of Cruisebone dust. As they say, you either die as a hero, or you live long enough to see your parts in dust mechanical nightmares. With this video comes to an end. Mark1 Code out.
But who will survive?